Welcome back to Refit and Sail. My name's George Isted, the Solent Boat Butler. I refit and repair boats for a living, largely sailing boats, but I sometimes do motorboats as well. And that's what this channel is all about. Mostly, it's about my work and the boats that I get involved with, both professionally and personally, on and off the water. But this is the first episode in what may become a new series of videos on my channel, all about your projects, your boats that you may have at the end of a boatyard waiting to be revived and refitted. It may be a boat that you are working on right now, or it could be like this boat that's been in the water for a few months now and done some adventuring, having had a fairly extensive refit. And I'm going to be talking about this Contessa today. This is a 1980 Contessa 32 that looks fairly standard from the outside, apart from some big solar panels on an arch at the back, but it has some really interesting stuff going on down below. So up until fairly recently, this was a bog stock standard Contessa 32. It was built in 1980, but the current owner bought her with a plan to do some fairly adventurous sailing, and he wanted to do a refit to make the boat his own and have it how he wants it. And there are two big projects that have happened to this boat, which is why it is featured on this channel. So the first thing is it's gone for a completely electric drive. So that isn't that uncommon these days. There's lots of boats all over YouTube, all over the internet and all over the seas, to be honest with you now, which are electric drive, but not so many of them are classic yachts like this Contessa 32. So it's going to be interesting to look at how that was done, why that was done, and having sailed this boat all the way to the Azores and back this summer, it's going to be interesting to hear what the owner has to say about the benefits, the pros and the cons of the system that he has installed. The second thing, he's done some interesting things on the interior of this boat. He's done a bit of an internal refit to make the boat suit how he wants to use the boat, and he's had some quite clever ideas about how that can come together to have an interior which is a little bit unusual if you're used to what a Contessa 32 looks like. I have not been inside this boat yet, so this is going to be as new to me as it is to you, the viewer. Here she is. This is the Contessa 32 called Charlotte. There is no relationship between this Charlotte and Lottie or Countess Charlotte that I've done a fairly big refit on, other than the name. But as I said, she was a bog stock standard 1980 Contessa 32, and yeah, from the exterior she looks pretty much a standard 32, but there is a clue as to what's going on at the back here, because there is a rather large solar array with lots and lots of watts, I imagine, of power on a kind of gold post or a solar arch at the back of this boat. Before we introduce you to the owner, I quite like this little touch on the side here, Jeremy Rogers' signature on a little graphic on the side here. I think that's a really nice touch. Jeremy Rogers and David Sadler were the designers of the Contessa 32, and they really did design a very beautiful boat. I'm pleased to be joined by Norman here, the owner of this Contessa 32. I only have one microphone because the other one is at the bottom of the Mediterranean Sea, unfortunately, and I haven't yet replaced it. So we have a microphone winch handle today. Welcome, Norman. Thank you very much for showing me your very lovely Contessa 32.
No problem.
So it's quite an interesting boat, this one. We've got some interesting mods to show the viewers. So maybe we could start with you explaining how you came into sailing and the history of this boat and how it came to be that you chose to buy a Contessa 32, and how you chose or came across this particular boat.
Well, I started sailing during the COVID lockdowns, in between the first and second COVID lockdown, and I was instantly hooked. I then bought a Convertible, which I sailed for a couple of years on the Menai Straits.
Right.
And then in 2022, I started looking for something a little bit bigger. And I came across this boat, which was in Sunderland. And I'd been researching electric drive with a view to converting the Convertible. But the costs would have been way more than the boat was worth. So I didn't see that it was worth doing at that particular moment. But when I bought Charlotte, I decided that going electric was the next next major alteration. So yeah.
Was there a particular reason why you chose a Contessa over any other boat? I mean, obviously a Corribee, I assume it was a 21, was it?
Yeah, 21
so
foot fin keel.
Yeah, so
fully encapsulated, very similar hull shape to the Contessa. And I kind of narrowed it down to initially 3 boats, and then discounted 1 because it was a long keel and tricky manoeuvring into marinas. So it was between the Contessa 32 and the rival 34. And funnily enough, when you look at the plans and you superimpose one on top of the other, they're almost identical. The rival has an extra 2 foot on the stern, but internal dimensions are virtually identical.
Right.
But I kept coming back to the Contessa, and since buying it, everybody has said, "Oh, you've got a good boat there. She'll look after you." And sure enough, I've been really pleased.
To come on to the electric drive, lots of people talk about how good they are or not good they are on the internet. It doesn't suit everyone, is probably fair to say. But it was obviously something that you were very keen to do because you looked at the Corribee. For you, what was the main driving force of having electric drive over a traditional diesel engine?
Well, sailing down from Sunderland down to Grimsby, the first day was all downwind motor sailing. After a bit of a stormy few days. So there was a lot of swell, there was a lot of diesel fumes blowing into the cockpit. I was throwing up all day.
Right, that's fair.
The constant noise and vibration and the smell, I thought, I've got to get rid of this engine. I got into the halfway point at Scarborough feeling very, very green, and it took me a few days to recover, to be honest. The second day I had a beautiful sail down. As soon as I got to the mouth of the Humber, the engine refused to start. I tried for over an hour. In the end, I had to call out the RNLI. So that kind of cemented the the decision.
Right. So it was the smell of diesel and the smell of diesel smoke obviously sets you off maybe in terms of seasickness.
Yeah. But to be honest, since converting, the ease of using the motor when you need it just a little bit. You don't have to start a diesel and let it warm up. You literally just feed a bit of motor in. Like, for example, if it's very, very light wind and you need to tack and you haven't quite got enough momentum, just feed a bit of motor in and then knock it off again. So it makes sailing too easy, really. It doesn't suit everyone, and obviously range is a big issue. But the ease of use and being able to get free fuel. I mean, okay, I've got almost a kilowatt of solar, although today is very dull. But when the sun's shining, I mean, this year I've hardly used any shore power at all. I'm plugged in now. But for about 3 or 4 months during the summer, I didn't use any shore power at all. Free fuel.
Well, I think it's fair to say that Norman has done pretty well this year. So you finished the boat up pretty much last year.
I did the conversion 2022 and into 2023.
And you've had a bit of a shakedown this year.
Yeah, absolutely. The Azores. I did the Jester Challenge in June. Sailed from Plymouth to Sierra in the Azores. And went through a stormy patch, but and as people said, the boat looked after me. So
So it's fair to say that after a fairly significant refit, this boat has done a few miles now and has been pretty well tested inshore and offshore. The systems have had a good.
I've probably put over 4,000, maybe almost 5,000 miles on this boat since purchasing in 2022. I'm a fairly new sailor, as I say. I learnt in 2020, and I'm already over 5.5, I think, or close to 6,000 miles now.
Very good.
So
well done.
That's
more than a lot of people do in 10 years. So
so I've heard.
Fantastic.
And it's a constant learning process. I'm loving it.
Brilliant. Good on you. So let's talk about the electric drive just for a little bit more, in terms of numbers and stats and what have you, because I think people are going to be interested in that. So what's the motor and what's the drivetrain that you've got on the boat?
It's a 10 kilowatt, 48 volt brushless motor. It's bought through Thunderstruck in the USA. I think the motor is fairly standard. I think it's a Mote Energy, and it's a Curtis controller. So the motor's 10 kilowatts, although I've not used any more than about 4 kilowatts, to be honest.
Right.
The battery system is, I've got a lot of battery power. I've actually got 200 kilograms of batteries. There's two 280 amp hour at 48 volt batteries.
280 amp hour at 48 volt.
Yeah.
Right, okay. So 540
560,
amp
yeah,
hours. Oh, sorry.
560 amp hours at 48 volts. So
It's
that's
the end
almost
of the day,
that's
so I
over
apologise
2
for the
kilo.
maths.
That's over 2,000 amp hours at 12 volt.
Yeah. That's pretty sizable. How much solar have you got up here?
There's two 400 watt panels,
Right,
so 800
okay.
watts. These are high voltage panels,
Yeah.
Sun Power Maxion.
Yeah.
The reason I went for these was because they are high voltage, so
Mm-hmm.
ideal for charging a 48 volt system. However, when I fitted them, I was getting over a kilowatt,
Right.
and that's in UK Sun.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I've regularly seen over 800 watts.
That's okay. That's very
So they
impressive.
do perform very well.
Yeah.
But then, researching solar panels, they came out tops on almost every report I read. So yeah, it was good choice, I think.
Fantastic. And in terms of the control systems for like solar charge controllers,
There's a Victron controller for each panel.
Right.
So
okay.
if one panel drops out for any reason or is a problem, I've still got another panel.
So you've got
Sep-
redundancy in terms
yeah,
of
separate controllers for each.
That's very sensible.
The other part of the system, there's a Victron 3000 watt inverter charger.
Yep.
I've got a couple of DC to DC converters which take the 48 volts down to 12 volts for the other systems and the anchor windows and whatever.
Yeah.
And then
So the 12 volt system is
it's
kind of like a standard
totally
boat.
separate to the 48.
Yeah, and the 12 volt system is charged by the 48 volt system, or
absolutely.
can it also be charged by shore power?
Well, yes, through the 48.
But through the 48
Yeah,
and then
yeah.
the DC to DC.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Okay. Gotcha.
It started raining,
And
actually.
it is just starting to spit with rain, unfortunately, folks. But we're going to go inside in a minute. Okay, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
And then we will come on to the internal mods. So we'll talk about this in a minute.
The
and we'll show you some
second
pictures,
mounting
but,
the second battery unit involved quite a big internal refit.
Yeah.
The first battery is in the engine bay.
Yep.
So removing a 145, 150 kilogram engine and ancillaries,
Yeah.
the 48 volt motor is actually quite small. The total weight of that is probably 35 to 40 kilograms with all the mounts and reduction gear.
Yeah.
But then there's a 100 kilogram battery in there as well. So that
Yeah.
kind of balances everything up. The second battery is next to the mast.
So what you're
that's pretty
saying
central.
is, just to recap, you've taken the engine and gearbox out, you've reinstalled in the engine bay a big battery and the motor and all the mountings and stuff,
Yeah.
and that has equated to about the same weight
Yeah,
as
it's
the engine that
pretty
you
much
took
balanced,
out. So
balanced out. There's a
and
little
then
bit of extra weight with the Solent, but although it's quite a big diameter frame, it's actually quite lightweight
Right.
tubing.
It's thin
so it's
tube.
quite a thin tube,
Right,
yeah.
okay,
So it's actually
gotcha.
quite a lightweight construction.
but going back to the weight, so engine and motor and one battery, about the same weight as the engine that came out.
Yeah.
And then there's one additional battery which is sort of centrally located
Yeah,
in the boat.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
weight-wise, it's not too much heavier and it's not any lighter. You've just obviously the
Yeah,
amount of battery
yeah.
you carry is purely going to be a function of how much range you want. So if you
Absolutely.
were happier with less range, of course,
Yeah,
you could
just have
less
the one battery
and
bank.
have
Yeah,
the one
yeah,
battery, and
absolutely.
you'd be weight neutral on the conversion.
Yeah.
So,
Since I'm a solo sailor, I just think that an extra battery is only like an extra person, isn't it? And
Yeah.
supplies.
Yeah, cool. Well, I'll tell you what, it's starting to spit with rain, so I think we will go inside. I'm hoping the sound quality is okay with me sharing one mic. I'll find out in the edit. If you like this sort of content, do, one, give me a thumbs up and give me a like and subscribe to the channel, please, because it really does make a massive difference to the growth of the channel. And two, if you're interested in seeing other people's refits outside of what I do professionally, then let me know in the comments. If you just give me a little note down below saying, yeah, this is the sort of thing I am interested in, that would be ace. If you're wanting me to stop doing this sort of stuff, then tell me that as well, I guess. So, such is the nature of YouTube. You get comments both on the positive and the negative. But let me know your thoughts. Right. I'm going to go down below and take a look at the inside, because we've got some interesting joinery arrangements going down there, and we're going to have a quick look at the engine bay, batteries, and all that sort of good stuff. Right, let's have a little look down below. Oh, you've got quite a nice looking floor, and on the left hand side, on the starboard side, we have this somewhat unusual arrangement for a Contessa, but we'll come on to that in a minute. There's some clever stuff that goes on with that, and obviously we have a fairly standard Contessa inside, quarter berth there, galley there, we've got an Origo stove and what looks like a microwave. Engine box, obviously there is a battery and electric motor in there. We'll spin around just so you can see the whole thing. I guess that is Norman's bed up there. I'm not going to pry and go up there, but there is a V-berth up there. Standard kind of heads on the port side, hanging locker on the starboard side, stuffed full of clothes, bearing in mind that Norman is just back from a fairly extensive cruise. There's lots and lots of cruising and personal gear on here. Oh, we've got a fancy display there. That must be something to do with the charge controlling system. Yes, Victron. Excellent. Right, let's bring down Norman and he can show us the engine.
So the big black box, that's a 48 volt battery, which is consisting of 16 Eve cells. They're 3.65 volts at 280 amp hours. So each cell is a fairly sort of small voltage, but with 16 of them gives you a 48 volt battery. Well, it's just over 50 volts. There's also a BMS, a battery management system device on top as well, which helps to balance all the cells. So at the very back, there's a 10 kilowatt motor, and behind that there's a Curtis controller, and then in the cockpit there's a small throttle control. Buzz bars, battery isolators, various breakers, and very heavy duty cable. And that's kind of it really. It's a pretty simple system. It's a belt drive from the motor. There's a small output drive unit on the end of the motor, which goes to a larger pulley on the that's connected to a thrust bearing, which then connects to the prop shaft. So it's a 2.6 to 1 reduction ratio. So it's very similar to an engine gearbox, I suppose.
And I imagine it's in operation incredibly quiet.
Yeah, but it's not as quiet as you would think. Because being a brushless motor, it's a lot noisier than a brushed motor. So there is some noise and vibration. And when I first installed it, it was hard mounted onto a stainless steel plate, which was then bolted down to the engine beds. But it was actually quite noisy and a fair bit of vibration, which kind of transmitted through the whole boat. Yeah. So I later junked that and bought some engine mounts. They're R&D mounts, and they were spec'd for the weight of the system. And a little bit of extra steel work, and that made a massive difference. It's a lot smoother and quieter now. There's still some vibration, but it's pretty quiet. Well, it's way quieter than a diesel.
right, I'm sure.
And the old diesel was a 3-cylinder Vitas engine, and it was not a smooth engine. So yeah, so that's kind of the heart of the system, really.
Cool. What's the so you've got a Victron controller for all the systems that are just going on in the boat. The screen up here. Yeah. So I can't remember what they're called. Well, the model of that.
This is a Serbo GX, and this is I think it's Touch 50. I think it's called.
Right.
So battery percentage. Yeah. That's the DC output. This is the solar input. As you can see, it's very low at the moment because it's very dark outside. The top ones are the AC, the inverter and whatever, but they're all showing blank at the moment. The reason being, there's an issue with talking to the inverter charger. I need to address that. Right. It may be a faulty cable, I don't know. Yeah, so that's
Okay.
that's the battery monitoring system.
Right, gotcha. So you've got 97% battery currently at the moment, and even though it's actually raining and pretty grey out there, you've
Well,
got 38 watts.
I'm actually plugged into shore power.
You plugged it, yeah.
Yeah, so you can actually see there's 1100 and something watts coming in. So,
Right,
yeah,
okay,
yeah,
gotcha,
yeah.
gotcha.
This is the main ignition switch, so that's on.
Yep.
And that means that the system is now energised. You can see a little orange flashing light on the controller just down below.
Okay, yeah.
And then the controller, the actual speed control, the throttle control is in the cockpit.
Yep. Okay, cool.
This little button here that's for a small water pump, which feeds water down the shaft and lubricates the cutlass bearing.
Okay. So thanks, Norman, for showing us the engine stuff. So there is an additional battery that is kind of just underneath your bottom, next to the mast down there, isn't there? So which is about the same size.
It is exactly
as
the
that
same.
one.
Yeah, it's exactly the same.
Exactly the same. But the other interesting thing is you might notice we are sitting facing each other in what I think you could almost
and you
call...
can see straight out the windows as well.
It's almost like a deck saloon Contessa 32. So this bunk here is normally way down there, and it's a double berth with a table in a kind of a U shape, and I'll try and insert a picture of a standard Contessa 32 layout here so you can see what I mean. But you've modified this because you sail alone, and it's allowed you, I guess, to store all your batteries under there.
Yeah.
And I noticed down here
there's
also a drawer fridge, which is quite cool. Where did the idea for this come from?
The need to put an extra battery in, basically.
All right, okay.
I knew what kind of range I would get from one battery, but I was a little concerned about, range anxiety is the biggest issue with electric drive.
Yeah.
So I thought if I can put this extra battery in, that will double the range effectively. Also, I wanted to put a fridge in. The cool boxes that are in the boat already, in a standard 32, are quite tricky to convert to an actual fridge. So, and I was never really happy with the U-shaped with a table in the middle anyway. It was very awkward to get in and out. It was very low down, so you had no view out of the windows.
Yeah.
And I'd seen this arrangement. This is like a dinette. A lot of narrowboats have this.
Yeah, absolutely. It is similar
I actually
to
lived on a
narrowboat.
narrowboat for 10 years.
Right, okay.
I actually took a bare steel shell, had a steel boat made, and spent 2 years fitting it out.
Yeah.
And although I didn't have a dinette on mine, I'd seen a lot of other boats with a similar arrangement to this, with a drop-down table, and it converts to a berth. So I figured that changing the whole setup on the port side would allow me space for the second battery and space for a drawer fridge, and still be an easy convert. It's very quick to convert to a bunk.
Cool.
And it's the same size berth as was original, but it works really well.
Show us how this rather clever arrangement can be adjusted and changed so that it turns into a double bed. Is that possible?
I will actually need to put the microphone down.
Right,
but,
okay, well I can hold that.
So
It's very professional here on Refit and Sail, as you can tell. We are all about the production quality.
So the table is on like a cantilever hinge system, so there's a little a narrowboat tiller pin.
Right, perfect.
So let me just adjust this. So this whole table drops down. Okay, goes into there. And then the back rests. They fill in. And there you have.
Wow. Okay, that
it.
was a lot quicker and easier than I was expecting, if I'm honest.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let me have a look at these hinges you've got here. So just pull the cushion forward a bit. So I think you said earlier your brother made those?
Yeah, I must have spent several months trying to figure out how best to raise and lower the table. And I needed to drop it down 300 mil. Yep. So the hinges are like a twin pivot. They're 150 mil long, and I thought if I just have some pieces cut in stainless. So I did some drawings, sent them off to a laser cut company. They're 5mm stainless steel, and then my brother, who is a welder, a retired welder, he welded everything together for me, and then just a retaining bolt to hold it all together.
Fantastic.
And it works really well.
So if I go down here a minute, take your cushions off, let's have a quick look at this scissoring arrangement you've got. Can I see that?
Oh yeah. That's,
how does that work? So can we see it even?
I'm not sure actually.
Hold on a minute. Okay, so that just clicks up like that.
So you can just see they kind of double hinge. These are actually temporary,
Right.
just to see how everything worked. So I shall be making some more, another pedestal out of oak or oak ply. But,
Right.
So this was just as a test fit, I guess.
Yeah, yeah.
And just pop the tiller pin back in, and there we go.
Well, that is ingenious.
Back to the
Very
table
clever.
and,
Back to being a table. So literally a few seconds, pull a pin out, swing it down, put the cushions on, and you've turned your kind of dinette table arrangement into a fairly decent
And it's
double
really,
bed.
It's really easy to use as well. You've got visibility out of the windows. It's a much nicer experience sitting at this height.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I can have breakfast with a view.
That's fantastic. And I've just noticed, I recognise this deck ring arrangement.
Yes,
where
indeed.
did you buy that one from?
Oh, I think it was a guy called George, I think.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I do a line in.
Yes,
deck rings
actually,
that,
it's worked really well. I did slip up with the measurements, as you don't look too closely at.
Oh, they're slightly uneven. Well, that's fine. We won't look at both sides at the same time. But that's great.
It's because I wanted to bring all the lines back to the cockpit. Being a solo sailor and a fairly new sailor, I'm very careful when I'm on board anyway. But I just figured that I'm in my mid-60s now, so I thought, keep it as safe as possible. So I can raise and lower the main and reef all from the cockpit.
Before we go, it'd be really interesting, as someone that has been down to the Azores and back, I've dropped into the Azores a few times, how was the Jester Challenge down to the Azores? Did you enjoy ocean passage making?
Absolutely loved it. Yeah, that was my first ocean passage. So I'd been looking into doing a longer ocean passage anyway. And I inquired about the Jester, even though it's primarily aimed at solo sailors in small boats up to 30 foot.
Yeah.
I contacted the helm and they said, 32 foot's fine.
It's close enough.
Yeah, it's in the spirit, that's fine. So we set off from Plymouth, 16th of June.
Yeah. How many boats in total?
There was 15 and we all got there okay.
Were you the largest boat?
Yes.
Right, okay.
There was, I think, there was two 30-foots, and I can't remember whether there was a 31, but in previous years there's been up to 33 foot.
Right, yeah.
I was quite slow.
Well, that's okay, as long as you got there. So if you haven't heard about the Jester Challenge, it is not a race. It's kind of like a rally, and it's based, as I understand it, on the idea that Blondie Hasler did this, All-Star type race in a folk boat, and it's all about small boats being able to go offshore and do serious ocean passages in safety, and without all the massive organisation and cost of very large high-profile races. These are very normal, ordinary sailors, very low-key.
No rules, no entry fee.
Yep.
Obviously, you still need to be responsible and take it seriously.
Yeah.
But I loved it, and I got there in, I think it was.
I was going to ask how long did it take you to get down?
15 days. I think I came in 10th. So
right.
pretty slow.
It's not a race, but they obviously still. Is that 10th as in on the water, or did they put any sort of handicapping system in place?
No,
It was literally you were.
Yeah,
Okay.
I just got in.
You were the
10th
10th boat
place.
in. Yeah. So it's not a race, it's a rally, but actually it's something that's been on my radar for probably 15, 20 years as something that is a really fun way of challenging yourself to go off and do an offshore passage in the company of other like-minded people in, relatively speaking, low budget, boats that you and I have, that you see in marinas or on rivers or on swinging moorings up and down the country. And I think it's a really great organisation. It's great that people can have this, I guess, support network within the group of right, how do we prepare?
And it's arranged properly. It's all the boats are tracked as well, so it's really well organised. Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much for showing us your boat. I really appreciate your time. It's been really interesting to see the electric drive. I'm going to have another closer look at it without the camera in front of my face, probably tomorrow. And this arrangement's really clever. I know this is a classic boat now. Contessa 32s are very much thought of as plastic classics, and there are going to be some people that are going to be muttering probably in the comments about changing an arrangement that maybe has proven to work well. But there are 1,000 of these boats kicking around. There are a lot of them on the water, and at the end of the day it's up to the owner to make it their own for how they want to use it and sail their boat. And I think it's fantastic when people like Norman do something that's really novel in terms of this arrangement. I've never seen this before, but he's obviously taken it from kind of a narrowboat environment and converted it to work on a Contessa.
Yeah, it works well. It certainly works well. And to be honest, it's still the same boat. It's just a minor refit inside, I suppose.
To make it how you want it. And again, on the electric drive, it's not the first Contessa to have an electric drive, but it is an unusual thing to have in kind of a classic boat. But there are some very sound reasons for kind of going down that route. What we didn't touch on before we go is pros and cons. Obviously, we've talked about the pros of the electric drive. Obviously it's pretty quiet. You're not buying any diesel. You're not servicing an engine. An engine in itself is a very expensive thing, but obviously, the cost of buying a motor and all the batteries is a fairly expensive thing as well. But were there any cons or any negatives that you found that you maybe weren't expecting?
There was an issue with the motor. It had a faulty encoder.
Okay.
It's a tiny little chip on the back of the motor.
Right, okay.
And the motor was cutting out when it got up to a certain.
Okay,
certain
but that was a faulty product as opposed to an issue with the system.
I think they had a bad batch. I contacted Thunderstruck in America. They said, we know all about it. We'll send you a new encoder straight away. And it came a few days later, to be honest, from California.
Right.
Fitted that. It worked a lot better. It was a big improvement. However, it's still an issue. There's still a bit of an issue there.
Right. And
contacting Thunderstruck again, they did inform me that it may be needing to be reprogrammed. The motor and controller needs to be and now they will do it for free, but it means taking it all out and sending it back to America. So I need to find someone in the UK to maybe reprogram it.
Okay.
But up to about 4 kilowatts it still works fine. It just occasionally cuts out and it starts up again, no problem. You just basically zero the throttle and then start again.
So speed wise, you're running, I think, a 3-bladed fixed prop. So speed wise, what can you get at obviously you can go as slow as you like, but if you do need to give it a burst of power, what would you say you would get if you give it the beans?
It should do easily 5 or 6 knots, I would think, at full power. But of course, at full power, you're going to run through the battery. Even with this big battery system that's on board, I would deplete the batteries in a couple of hours, I would think. 2.5 to 3 hours.
But if you're motoring at, say, 4 to 4.5 knots?
Well, at 1 kilowatt, in flat water, I should get between 3 and 3.5 knots, maybe 4 knots possibly. And 1 kilowatt would give me 24 hours of motoring.
Right. Okay.
So, and I've actually motored quite a lot. So the cons are you need to be very careful about how you motor. It's taught me to push myself to sail more, for absolutely sure.
And get the tides right.
Absolutely. Coming up here, for example, I did a lot of tacking from where I was anchored in the Solent to get up to the mouth of the Hamble. Involved quite a few tacks. Now, if I had a diesel engine, I'd probably just be inclined to knock
Yeah.
the engine on and motor through it. But of course, when you've got limited range, it pushes you to sail more.
Yeah, yeah.
And there's been many a situation where I've been tacking through a nice wind, but I've seen boats going past with the sails down, just motoring past me. I'm thinking,
Well, you get that, whatever. I think, unfortunately.
so that's the main con, I guess.
Yeah, okay. But
is
you could
that
argue it
you've
makes
got-
you a better sailor because it
I guess,
forces you to.
well, it's forcing
think about
it's teaching me to sail a lot more, for sure. Because I'm still a newbie,
Yeah.
so I've got a lot to learn, and I think I'm learning pretty quick.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, look, thanks again, Norman, for showing us your boat. I really appreciate it, and I hope you've enjoyed that. It's been really interesting to look at a somewhat modified Contessa 32 that I haven't had a hand in, apart from supplying some rudder bearings. And,
Yes,
and supplying
absolutely,
a
Deck ring,
custom
yeah.
deck ring for a Contessa 32. I'm just getting some more of those made. Let me know in the comments, are you interested in this sort of video? Then if you are, then I'd like to continue kind of doing them. If you've got a project which is novel and interesting in some way, or if you've got a boat that's languishing at the back of a boatyard that someday you want to get around to, and if you're not too far from me in the Hamble on the central south coast, then do drop me a line, and it may be that I could do a video about your project at some point in the future. Anyway, thanks again for watching. Thank you, Norman.
Thank you.
See you next time. Bye for now. Okay, give it some head. Oh, yeah, so it's just a very slight rumble. And I assume to go in reverse, it's just like a normal gear lever. Fantastic.